You walk into your kitchen on a quiet morning, your coffee mug warm in your hands, looking forward to a few moments of peace before a busy day begins. Then you see it, a thin, shifting brown line of ants moving steadily along the baseboard, or perhaps the sudden, frantic scurry of a roach disappearing behind the toaster. Your stomach drops a little. You stand there, watching them, doing the heavy math in your head. $200 for the initial visit, $300 or $400 a year for the quarterly contract. Every 90 days, a heavy truck pulls into your driveway, and a man in a stiff uniform walks around your foundation, spraying a clear liquid from a tank, something he will not let you read the label of. We have been taught by decades of clever television commercials that this is simply what responsible homeowners do. We write the check, we trust the uniform, and we look away. But stop and think about that for a moment. Why have we accepted the idea that keeping our own living spaces free of pests requires a permanent subscription to a chemical corporation? Before you write that next check, put the phone down and listen. 3 years ago, I sat at a long, scrubbed oak kitchen table in Holmes County, Ohio, and watched a 70-year-old Amish grandmother scoop a fine white powder into an old tin, measuring it out as carefully as if she were preparing flour for a loaf of sourdough. The farmhouse around us was old, built in 1889. It sat less than 50 feet from a working barn, filled with horses, livestock, hay, and grain bins. By every modern rule of pest control I had ever been taught, that drafty wood structure should have been absolutely crawling with insects. Yet the kitchen was spotless. I actually got down on my hands and knees to look beneath the dry sink, behind the heavy wood stove, and inside the dark corners of the open pantry. There were no plastic bait stations, no sticky glue boards, and no sharp chemical smells. When I asked the grandfather, an old man named Eli, how they managed it, he smiled. The patient laugh of a man who has watched modern visitors be amazed by simple things his whole life. He walked over to a cupboard in the mudroom and pulled out a plain glass jar with a zinc screw lid. Inside was a soft white powder mixed with golden cornmeal and a few fine flakes of a dried green herb. He told me that single jar, filled with a mix that costs less than $2 to put together, had kept their home completely clear of pests for 40 years. In over a century, no one in their family had ever called an exterminator. Not $1 had been paid to a pest control company since the house was raised. Understand this. This is not folk magic, and it is not an old wives' tale. The active ingredient in that glass jar was a common staple of American life as early as the 1860s, sold in every rural general store from the East Coast to the western frontier. It used to sit on the shelf right next to the baking soda and the laundry starch, costing mere pennies a pound. The specific refinement that keeps it working in a home for years instead of days comes from a faded German-language household manual printed in 1908 called Der Hausfreund. The base of this traditional mix is plain, pure mineral boric acid. The beauty of it lies in how it works, which is entirely mechanical rather than chemical. When a crawling insect walks across this fine powder, which feels as soft as talc between your fingers, the microscopic, razor-sharp mineral crystals physically abrade and scratch the delicate waxy coating on the outside of the bug's exoskeleton. That waxy layer is the only thing keeping moisture locked inside the insect's body. Once it is scratched open, the insect begins to lose its internal water, drying out completely within a matter of hours, like a traveler lost in a vast desert. At the same time, because insects are compulsively clean and groom themselves constantly by running their legs and antennae through their mouth parts, they inevitably swallow the powder. Once ingested, the mineral compound quietly shuts down their digestive tract from the inside. It is a dual assault: physical dehydration from the outside and systemic poisoning from the inside. Modern entomology research from major universities has confirmed what our great-grandmothers knew in their bones, while roaches and ants have developed a powerful, modern resistance to nearly every synthetic nerve agent sprayed by commercial companies since the 1950s. A bug cannot evolve its way around being physically scratched open and dried out. The old mineral never stops working. The expensive synthetic chemicals are the ones that wear out. However, I must be completely straight with you about the limits of this method, because I do not believe in offering empty promises. Boric acid is low in toxicity compared to the synthetic solutions in the exterminator's truck, but it is absolutely not harmless, and it is not food. If a child or a pet swallows a significant amount of the raw powder, it is a serious issue that requires a call to poison control, just as if they had eaten dishwasher detergent. The old-timers were often too casual with it, leaving it out in open bowls, but we cannot afford to be reckless. Furthermore, this method will completely fail if it is applied incorrectly. If you simply buy a box of the powder, march into your kitchen, and dump a heavy white pile under your sink, nothing will happen. The ants will simply walk around it, and you will throw the box away in frustration, believing the old ways don't work. If the powder is exposed to heavy steam or standing water in a damp basement, it will absorb the moisture from the air, cake into hard clumps, and lose the loose, dusty, abrasive texture that makes it lethal. A clumped bait is a dead bait. It demands a precise understanding of the hidden geography of your house. To make this $2 solution work, you have to stop looking at your kitchen as a finished room and start looking at it the way a crawling insect does. You have to know the 6 specific structural paths where pests actually travel, the hidden wall cavities where they build their long-term nests, and the exact traditional ratios of bait and stabilizers that keep this powder loose and dry for years. Let me bring the jar to the table, lay out the ingredients, and show you exactly how to mix it and exactly where to place it. Clear a space on your kitchen counter or a sturdy wooden table. We are going to assemble the tools and the ingredients, and I want you to approach this task with a calm mind and an unhurried hand. You will need a dry glass mixing bowl, a heavy spoon, a simple electric coffee grinder wiped clean of any old coffee dust, and a few plain white paper coffee filters. Look at the ingredients laid out before you. First, the pure mineral boric acid. A stark, brilliant white powder that feels entirely weightless, almost like talc between your fingertips, completely devoid of any chemical scent. Next, the white sugar, sweet and crystallized, followed by the cornmeal, coarse and golden yellow, smelling faintly of dry summer fields. Finally, the dried bay leaves, brittle and deep olive green, holding a sharp, clean, camphoraceous aroma that will fill the room the moment we begin. The first typical mistake beginners make happens right here, before the mixing even starts. They look at the granulated sugar from the pantry and assume it is ready to use. Understand this, regular sugar crystals are far too large and heavy compared to the fine mineral powder. If you mix them as they are, the heavier sugar grains will naturally settle to the bottom over time. Or worse, the insects will carefully pick out the sweet crystals and leave the lethal mineral behind. We must create absolute uniformity. Take 1 cup of your regular granulated sugar, pour it into the coffee grinder, and pulse it for a full 30 seconds until a fine white cloud rises up like smoke. The sugar must be transformed into a soft, velvety dust. Empty it into your bowl. Now, take your dried bay leaves. Do not crumble them by hand. Place half a cup of the whole leaves into the same grinder and run it until they are reduced to a fine, dull green flour. Pour that green dust into the bowl alongside the sugar. Now we add the remaining pieces. Measure out 3 cups of the pure white boric acid powder and 1 cup of the golden cornmeal, adding them to the bowl. Take your spoon and begin to stir, slowly, moving from the bottom of the bowl upward. Watch the colors shift and blend. You are looking for a complete, seamless marriage of the ingredients. The final mixture should not show distinct streaks of white, yellow, or green. It should become a uniform, pale, sandy cream dust with a subtle greenish cast, holding a texture that feels like fine, dry silt. It will smell sweet from the sugar, earthy from the corn, and distinctly aromatic from the bay leaf. This is your finished bait, and as long as it remains completely dry, it will retain its potency for months and years to come. Store the bulk of it in a clean glass jar with a tight-fitting lid, and place it in a dark, dry cupboard away from the reach of children. Now, let us construct the delivery system. The closed bait pillows that keep this traditional remedy safe and contained. Take a single paper coffee filter and lay it flat on the table before you. Scoop exactly 1 generous tablespoon of the pale green mix and place it right in the center of the paper circle. Take the bottom edge of the filter and fold it up over the powder. Then fold the top down, creating a neat rectangle. Next, fold the left and right open, ends tightly inward toward the center, tucking one flap slightly inside the other to seal the pocket. What you hold in your hand is a small, firm paper packet. The paper is fibrous and porous. It allows the sweet herbal scent of the sugar and bay leaf to drift out into the dark corners of your home, drawing the pests in. The insects will easily chew a tiny, ragged hole through the paper to reach the food, coating their limbs in the dust, while your household pets and children remain completely blocked from making accidental contact. Prepare 5 or 6 of these pillows before we move throughout the house. As we begin the application, we must confront the most common mistake that causes people to abandon this method. Application density. A beginner often takes a spoon, goes under the kitchen sink, and dumps a thick, heavy white mound of powder along the floor. Stop and think about this from the bug's perspective. To a small ant or a scurrying roach, a thick ridge of powder is a physical wall. They will see it, feel it with their antennae, and simply turn around to find another path across your kitchen. You do not want a barrier. You want an invisible trap. The powder must be applied so lightly that it resembles nothing more than a natural settling of household dust. If you can see a distinct white line from across the room, you have used far too much. Clean it up with a dry cloth and start over. Using a gentler touch, let us walk to the first crucial point. Go to your breaker panel and shut off the electrical power to the room you are treating. Safety is never a place to cut corners. Come back to the room with a screwdriver and remove the plastic faceplates from the outlets along your exterior walls. Look closely at the dark, narrow gap between the drywall cutout and the electrical box. This gap is a hidden doorway leading directly into the hollow interior of your walls where colonies live. Take a clean, dry plastic condiment squeeze bottle with a pointed nozzle and fill it halfway with your loose bait mix. Insert the tip of the nozzle directly into that dark gap and give the sides of the bottle one short, sharp, gentle squeeze. A fine, invisible mist of the powder will puff into the wall cavity, floating through the darkness and settling lightly onto the hidden wood studs and the back faces of the plaster. Screw the faceplate back on, restore the power, and move to the kitchen hotspots. Slide your refrigerator forward just a few inches. Take your squeeze bottle, hold it low to the floor, and puff a very light, almost imperceptible film of the sandy dust along the seam where the baseboard meets the floorboards. Slide the appliance back into place. Move to your lower cabinets. If the wooden toe kick panel at the base is sealed tight, use a long, thin wooden ruler. Dust the flat end of the stick with a thin layer of the powder. Slide it carefully into the dark void beneath the cabinet base, and give the stick a gentle tap against the floor to shake the dust loose into the darkness before pulling it back out. For the upper cabinets, take your stepladder and climb up until you can see the flat, hidden top ledge near the ceiling. Wipe away any old kitchen grease, let the wood dry completely, and lay 2 of your folded paper bait pillows flat in the center of the ledge, spaced 2 feet apart. Finally, go beneath your kitchen and bathroom sinks. Locate the exact spots where the water lines penetrate the drywall. Take your squeeze bottle and puff a light ring of dust entirely around the pipe where it meets the wall, ensuring that any insect attempting to step through that threshold must first walk through the microscopic abrasive crystals. Your home is now quietly, invisibly protected. working on the old terms. Let us pause here for a moment and sit quietly with the reality of what we are doing. I want you to understand the actual physics and biology at play behind those baseboards. Because when we look at traditional solutions, it is far too easy to relegate them to the category of simple luck or old folklore. We often tend to think these methods only worked in the past, because our grandparents had lower standards of cleanliness or fewer options available to them. That is a profound mistake. Understand this. The old-timers did not need a modern university degree in biochemistry to observe what consistently worked over the span of 40 or 50 years in a crowded farmhouse. Today, we are going to strip away the commercial labels and look closely at the quiet, unyielding scientific principles that make this simple mineral dust function. It is a profound lesson in how the natural world operates when it is stripped of synthetic alterations and corporate branding. Think about the specific insects we are quietly fighting. The common ant, the roach, the silverfish. When you look at them scurrying across your floor, they appear tough, moving with a quick, armored resilience. But their greatest vulnerability is a physical reality they share with every single small living creature on this planet. The constant, terrifying threat of drying out. Because their bodies are tiny, they possess an immense amount of surface area compared to the very small volume of water they carry inside. To survive the dry air of an indoor room, nature has wrapped them in a brilliant, delicate armor. It is a microscopic layer of lipids and natural wax that completely coats the very outside of their shell, or cuticle. This wax layer acts exactly like a high-quality rain jacket or a thick layer of wax rubbed onto a canvas bag. It is the single barrier keeping the vital moisture inside their bodies from evaporating into the air. If that wax layer is compromised by even a fraction of a millimeter, the insect's life clock begins to run down rapidly. Now, recall the soft, silt-like texture of the boric acid powder we mixed in the bowl. To your fingers, it feels gentle, almost like dry cornstarch or talc. But under proper magnification, those white mineral particles are revealed to be sharp, jagged, multi-angled crystals. When an insect crawls over our carefully placed, dust-light application, the physical weight of its body presses its underbelly and joints directly against these microscopic edges. As it moves, the crystals physically scratch, tear, and abrade that vital protective wax coating. It is the exact physical equivalent of taking a piece of coarse, heavy sandpaper to a beautifully polished, waterproof surface. The seal is broken. Within a matter of hours, the insect's internal moisture begins to bleed out into the atmosphere through thousands of unseen, microscopic tears. They begin to dehydrate from the outside. It is a physical consequence they cannot escape or adapt to. Because no living creature on Earth can evolve a biological way to keep water inside a container that has been thoroughly shredded from top to bottom. The second phase of this process is even more elegant, because it transforms the insect's own deep survival instincts into its ultimate undoing. Stop and think about how a cat or a clean dog grooms itself after walking outside. Crawling insects are no different. They are compulsively clean creatures. As they travel through the dark, warm tunnels of your cabinet toe kicks, their legs, and the fine sensory hairs on their bodies collect the microscopic, pale cream dust we prepared. Once they return to the safety of their hidden nests deep behind the drywall, they immediately begin to clean themselves. They draw their legs and their long, sensitive antennae through their mouth parts to clear away the debris. In doing so, they inevitably swallow the sweet sugar, the cornmeal, and the fine mineral powder. Once this boron compound enters their digestive tract, the internal chemistry changes everything. It acts as a severe stomach poison, completely disrupting the delicate fluid balance inside their gut and systematically destroying the cellular lining that allows them to process nourishment. Understand this clearly. It is not like a modern synthetic nerve toxin that causes instant violent muscle spasms. Instead, it is a quiet internal mechanical failure. Think of it like throwing a handful of sharp, fine river sand, directly into the oiled, moving brass gears of an old mechanical grandfather clock. The clock does not stop ticking because the sand is chemically toxic to the metal. It stops because the physical friction of the grains grinds the movement to a complete, permanent halt. The insect can no longer process its food, its internal organs fail to retain fluid, and the entire biological system quietly ceases to function from the inside out. This is precisely why university entomology departments still use boric acid as the unchanging gold standard in laboratory testing. An insect can rapidly develop an immunity to a synthetic chemical spray by changing its internal liver enzymes over a few generations, which is exactly why modern chemical companies must constantly invent stronger, more volatile formulas every decade to keep their contracts alive. But an insect cannot develop an immunity to being physically scraped open and having its stomach mechanics ground to a halt by sand. The basic physics of the world do not change. But let us be completely honest about where this traditional method hits a hard wall. Because I will never sit at this table and promise you a magic powder that works everywhere without effort or understanding. This traditional mix has very strict boundaries of applicability, and if you ignore them, you will waste your $2 and your afternoon. The absolute greatest enemy of this mixture is moisture. Boric acid is highly soluble in water and it is naturally hygroscopic, meaning it greedily pulls dampness right out of the surrounding air. If you place this powder in a damp, unventilated crawl space along an open concrete basement floor that sweats during the spring rains, or right next to a leaking pipe under the bathroom sink, the method will fail completely. The beautiful, loose, dusty texture will absorb that water and transform into a hard, crusty cake, looking like dried plaster or salt. Once it hardens, the microscopic sharp edges of the crystals are glued together, and the powder loses its light, airborne quality. The insects will simply walk right over the top of the hardened crust as if it were ordinary kitchen stone, without a single grain sticking to their legs or scratching their shells. It becomes utterly useless. This is strictly a dry, indoor remedy. It belongs inside the dark, protected, climate-controlled cavities of your home, not out on the damp earth or exposed concrete. You must also understand the limits of what this mix can kill. This solution relies entirely on two things. The insect must walk through it, and the insect must groom itself. If a pest does not do both, this powder is entirely powerless. Take bedbugs, for instance. A beginner might think this fine powder will clear a mattress or a bedroom wall. It will not. Bedbugs do not forage for sugar or cornmeal, and their grooming habits are vastly different from roaches or ants. They feed exclusively on blood, and trying to treat a severe bedbug infestation with a baseboard dusting of boric acid will yield nothing but frustration. The same is true for flying pests like fruit flies, houseflies, or mosquitoes. They spend their lives in the air, landing on counters or ceilings, completely bypassing the hidden geography of baseboards and toe kicks where our powder rests. Furthermore, this is a method of deep patience. If you spray a commercial liquid from a can, you might see a bug drop and twitch within 10 seconds. This mineral mix does not do that. It takes 3 to 7 days for an individual insect to dry out or succumb to the internal shutdown, and it can take up to 3 or 4 weeks for an entire colony of ants to systematically haul the cornmeal back to their queen and collapse the nest from within. It is a slow, silent, invisible process. If you are looking for instant gratification or a dramatic chemical knockdown, this old knowledge is not what you want. It is for the person who is willing to wait a few weeks for a permanent, quiet resolution that stands guard inside the walls for a year, rather than a quick, dramatic fix that wears off in a month. We must accept the limitations of the old ways to truly appreciate their enduring strength. When you begin to pull back the heavy layers of time and look closely at the history of how our ancestors maintained their homes, you realize that what we call progress is very often just a clever way of selling us something we used to possess for free. Understand this. The quiet, steady grandmother in Holmes County was not practicing an isolated piece of eccentric backwoods folklore. She was the final, unbroken link in a long chain of traditional domestic science that spans centuries and continents. This specific white mineral powder was first isolated way back in the year 1702 by a quiet European physician and chemist named Wilhelm Holmberg, who distilled it from natural borax and named it Sal Sedativum Homburgi, the sedative salt of Homburg. For over 200 years, it was treated as a precious household companion, a gentle substance carried westward across the American continent in the wooden trunks of pioneers, tucked safely between the bags of flour and the iron skillet. It was an essential baseline of self-reliance, used to preserve wood, clean linens, and keep the homestead entirely secure from the creeping pressures of nature. Wikipedia, but the real shift. The dark historical corner, where this knowledge was deliberately buried, happened right after the conclusion of the Second World War. Stop and think about this for a moment. Our nation's industrial factories were suddenly sitting on vast mountains of synthetic nerve agents and chemical compounds developed for the war effort, and they desperately needed to cultivate a permanent civilian market for them. The modern pest control industry as we know it today, the fleet of white trucks, the recurring 90-day contracts, the uniformed technicians, did not exist before the late 1940s. It was constructed deliberately as a massive marketing channel for those new, highly volatile synthetic chemicals. The corporations funded the agricultural colleges, wrote the training manuals for the brand new profession of the exterminator, and successfully lobbied state legislatures to classify household pest treatment as a specialized service, requiring complex equipment and recurring applications. Step by step, they reclassified boric acid from an ordinary 2-cent grocery staple into a restricted substance, making it economically pointless for the small-town general store to keep it on the shelf. The old tins quietly vanished from the pantry. The collective memory of our grandmothers was systematically erased, replaced by a television commercial telling us to write a check to a stranger every single spring if you want the cold, hard documentary proof to quiet the persistent skeptic. In your mind, you do not have to take my word for it. You can look directly to the historical bulletins of the United States Department of Agriculture and the landmark mid-century research of Dr. Walter Ebeling at the University of California, Los Angeles. In the 1960s, Dr. Ebeling conducted extensive, rigorous structural studies on insect behavior and urban pest management. His published findings shook the chemical industry to its core. He proved that when cockroaches encounter modern synthetic liquid sprays, they immediately detect the volatile chemical odor and alter their paths, scattered by the repellent nature of the spray into the deep, untouched safety of the wall cavities where they continue to breed out of sight. But when those same insects encountered a light, dusty application of pure boric acid, they could not detect it. They walked through it completely unawares, picking up the lethal dust and carrying it straight back to the core of the nest. The official USDA technical bulletins and subsequent extensions consistently confirmed that while synthetic chemicals steadily lost their punch over the decades as the bugs developed rapid biological immunities, the old, traditional mineral never lost a single ounce of its effectiveness. The science was settled decades ago. The cheap, forgotten powder works better over the long term than the expensive subscription model. The Amish did not keep using it because they were stubborn. They kept using it because they were right. So, tomorrow morning, when you walk into your kitchen with your coffee mug in your hand and you see that familiar brown line along the baseboard, I want you to make a conscious choice. Do not reach for the phone. Do not invite a stranger into the space where your children play to spray a fluid he will not let you read the label of. Put the phone down. Understand this. The absolute reclamation of your home begins with a single small step of self-reliance. This weekend, go down to the local store and find that plain, dusty box on the bottom shelf. Spend the $2. Spend the 2 hours of your Saturday morning measuring out the sweet sugar, the golden cornmeal, the fine green dust of the bay leaf, and the pure white mineral powder. Feel the texture between your fingers. Smell the clean, aromatic camphor of the herb filling your kitchen. And take back the small, forgotten geography of your house. Take off the outlet covers, walk the 6 critical placement points, and set a quiet, invisible guard inside your walls that will stand watch for a full 12 months. There is a profound, quiet dignity in knowing how to solve your own problems with simple ingredients derived directly from the earth. It connects you to the grandmothers who managed spotless kitchens in 1889, to the pioneers who crossed the plains, and to a time when a home was a sanctuary maintained by the hands of the people who lived inside it. Not a profit center for a chemical corporation. You do not need the truck in the driveway. You do not need the contract. You only need the willingness to remember what the world spent 70 years trying to make you forget. Make the mix this weekend. Cover the cracks, protect the corners, and the next time the pest control salesman knocks on your front door with a clipboard and a promise, you can smile, thank him for his time, and tell him you have already taken care of it. You have the old knowledge now. Stand your ground, keep your home your own, and I will see you in the next one.